Hi, namaste, good afternoon. When we come into this world, we inherit some birthrights, and the greatest birthright that we are blessed with as we come into this world is to have an opportunity to balance, to study, to learn, to grow, to mature, to think, to feel. And we learn we can utilize all these tools that we're given as our birthright to inherit our greatest birthright. And that is the right to know who, what, when, why, where, and how we are, which will lead us ultimately, sooner or later. Hang in there, be patient. Your time will come. All these are given. That your birthright of unification, claiming your rightful spot, your rightful place in divine order, to understand the beauty of the divine, to understand that that's what we all are, one and the same. The great equalizer, the perfect democracy of equality. We all equal one. I just read something that was really nice, that I use the ocean sometimes as an analogy, as a metaphor for all the spirits, the unification, and talk about how a drop briefly, as it splashes up against some resistance and becomes an individual drop, and it keeps its individuality until it merges back into the greater ocean. So we're all drops within that ocean, but the opposite is equally so. Each one of us, while a drop, or the entire ocean. And we do have an opportunity, as we're this drop of water, a drop of ocean water, we have an opportunity. We don't have to wait until its culmination of our lifetime, the trajectory of our lifetime is absorbed, subsumed by the Mother Ocean, the Mother Spirit. We're granted an opportunity, and this is what awakening, this is what remembering the forgotten. Your birthright is the unity of the ocean. And through the act of birth, we're given opportunity to perfect, to become part of the perfection, the wholeness, while we're still on our life path. So really a blessing and the ultimate equalizer. Sometimes it seems that while we're alive, while we're in this individualized form, that maybe others have more than we do, more wealth, better looks, more brains, more opportunity, more possessions, more love. It's all, that's illusory. That's the Maya, this apparent separation, this apparent division. First of all, you have to know that even if it's not in your fractal, to wake up, to become part of the whole while you're alive. The thing we call death, the death of the body, will make it so. All corpses, all dead, empty shells of a previous vibrant life are equally dead. So maybe we're not equally alive if you look at it that way, if you're looking at it superficially. But in death, there is equality. Can't take it with you, isn't that what they say? But another birthright is the opportunity, if you so choose, to live in a state of grace, and along with that living in grace comes a recognition that only joy exists. Because that's my favorite way to label, to express, to identify the wholeness, the divinity, the unity, the inclusiveness, the entirety of all. I see it as joy, and it's a state that we can sustain no matter what changes life brings to us. So today I'm talking about happiness or joy. Now, one of the natural conditions of most human beings, one of the primary desires we share is happiness. People are always telling you, trying to teach you how to be happy. And I know, myself, I learned about happiness as a choice. You personally choose to be happy. It's that simple. I don't really get to choose a lot about this face that you're looking at, my height. I can change my weight, but there's certain conditions that are inherent in my physicality, in my being, in my body, on this level, that I don't get to choose. Lots of times it seems that we don't get to choose our thoughts. Especially in the monkey mind, we just have this random chatter, right? But something that we can choose is happiness. It's a choice. Now, happiness is not a birthright. You didn't come into this world to be happy. Sorry to break the news to you. You came into this world to experience happiness, but you also need to experience the apparently diametrically opposed of sadness. And it's the existence of one couldn't exist without the other. You couldn't understand what happiness is no more than you could understand daylight without nighttime. We need the apparent contradiction of an opposite. Again, these are all illusions. But just because we live in illusion does not make it seem any less real for all of us, or most of us. Because the responsibilities of maintaining your physical self in this world of ours are the same. You have to nurture, you have to feed, you have to probably work, you have to seek shelter, transportation, friendship, education. Now, because all of these are just part of the illusory world, you are not excuse your responsibility. As long as you're in this world, you have to be in this world. You have to put up with this world. You have to accept change. And then you not only have to do all these challenges, you have to learn to live in grace, equanimity. You have to stop responding to the changes, responding in the sense that it will detour you from your primary focus. And your primary focus is to all of our, at one point in time, it will become this. It starts as a desire. At some point, it becomes a need. You need to rediscover. You need to remember the forgotten. You need to know who you truly were, are, will be. You have to be able to answer and ask and answer these questions. But happiness is something that, people make a money teaching you how to be happy. And it's always if only if. This is the if only if. If only. If only I had the love of my life. If only I had money. If only I had a job. If only I had health. If only I had clarity. Clarity in the sense that I could see the world clearly. These are the conditions that we place upon ourselves. I'll be happy when I and happiness is a temporary state anyway, but it even becomes more temporary when you realize that within this drive or desire for happiness is you have to be equally willing to accept sadness. And not only that happiness is fleeting and difficult enough, and if you did accomplish these objectives, you have the love of your life, you have money, you have a big house and many cars in your garage, and you have the material things. But I ask you, do you have peace of mind? Is it enough? Are you satisfied? all these things, not only the illusion of having them, but the accomplishment of being at peace. And you have this happiness. But remember, this happiness is based on all the things on the outside that you somehow accomplished. Good for you. Somehow accomplished all the things that led to you being happy. Now what happens when you lose? Let's start with the number one most important thing as you get older is, of course, health. Your health begins to, which it does, deteriorate. You get some challenge, some disease. Can you hang on to the happiness then? Now compare this to my definition of happiness. It's just a choice. I choose to be happy. Equanimity was a gift that was gifted with early on in my journey. The ability to accept with equal balance, acceptance, is that some changes I won't like, and it will cause, as something happens that makes me sad. A friend who's injured, or you lose the one that you was loving you doesn't love you anymore. Well, there goes your happiness. But so it's not only elusive, but it's fiction. If it's based on, because if you lose something and your happiness was dependent on you having those things and now they're gone, well, where's your happiness now? But when you make a choice to be happy, and like I said, the biggest part for me of being that choice to be happy is I choose to be happy, is the willingness to live in equanimity, to accept the changes. Not only to accept changes, but to welcome changes, because they're inevitable. They're coming. Like it or not. So you might as well embrace it. I chose to accept change. How about that? I chose to be happy. Now, we talk about duality, the separateness, and sometimes at some point, we have to reconcile these apparently diametrically opposed. We have to see that happiness over here and sadness over here are part of the same sphere. Sadness implies by its nature lack of happiness, and happiness applies by its nature a lack of sadness. But it's just like yin and yang. Within that sadness is a grain of happiness. The possibility of happiness exists within the sadness, just as that grain or that dot of sadness exists in the condition of happiness. Yin and yang, that's why they have the opposite colored dots in the black. In the yin, the feminine, they have a white dot, and in the yang, the masculine, they have a black dot. And that's just the Chinese were brilliant. This yin yang is one of my ultimate symbols, because it's so succinctly, so unarguably demonstrates our condition. Now, the way I chose to dwell in the infinite is to be in a state of joy. And I talk about separating. Bliss is some like joy on steroids, okay? And I've mentioned before that sometimes bliss just kind of sneaks in there. I can't choose to be blissful. It's not like happiness, okay? I can't choose to be blissful. I accept that our birthright is living in a state of joy, light, infinite wisdom. However, the divine, the universe, the soul, however you choose to look at it. And after you reconcile these diametric, after you deal with duality and say, nope, anything that makes it, that's you, I, me, it, us, them, anything that divides or separates one from all and all from one. Just as I was talking about the ocean and the drop being inclusive of all the ocean, just as the ocean was inclusive of all the drops. This is your inherent natural birthright. So when you accomplish this, this is what I stress about ordinariness. You become so ordinary. What can be more ordinary than living in the natural condition and living in all of our birthrights that we share? Nothing could be more ordinary. So you can live in a state of joy. Irregardless, it's not dependent on any accomplishment. It's not dependent on a human doing. It's just being. It's just all there is. And I was trying to think of because I always could find an opposite, and so I began my process by looking at opposites. It's like the Chinese that I've learned, as small, as limited as it is. I always wanted to know the opposite: yes, no, tall, short, old, young. It just is how my mind always worked. It's opposites, really, antonyms. And then, of course, you learn synonyms so that you can, if my pronunciation was poor and they couldn't get it if I knew enough other synonyms, that I could say, that find, oh, yeah, you mean that. It's always the discovery. When I try my Chinese, it's always a process. I had to find somebody open and willing to explore, to consider what I might be talking about. To have a modicum of success with communicating in Chinese, which eludes me in the greatest part, but even sometimes the most minimal, I got something across. It's kind of rewarding, So, opposites. And I thought about joy. Well, joyless, maybe, okay, might be an opposite, but I thought, well, isn't joyless the opposite of joyful? Just like mindfulness, mindlessness has to be the opposite, doesn't it? So, joyful, joyless. And again, it passes the litmus test, because within being joyful as a condition, within being joyful is that little dot of joylessness. And being in a state of joylessness, there's that little dot of joyfulness. So, I wanted to find a term that I couldn't reduce to its opposite. Infinity. What's the opposite of infinity? Non-infinity? That's nonsense, isn't it? That makes no sense. Nonsense. No sense. And here's one: joy. It's your birthright. It's how we were intended to live our life in a state of joy. Now I went to Bliss a little bit. I want to go back to Bliss. Bliss is like, again, joy writ large. Bliss, it's a taste. I get hints of bliss. I can't choose it. I can't say at this point, in this body, maybe when I'm no longer encumbered by this body and I'm in the Hall of Buddhas, and bliss is the normal, bliss, maybe bliss is the birthright of a Buddha. Bliss is the natural condition that these beings, these supercharged, these beings exist in. All I know is that I get glimpses of it. And it has to be, it just kind of seeps in. It's just all of a sudden, boom, there I am. But it's very short-lived. And I've come to terms with it because I know that with that intensity of bliss, I believe that that's how I leave my body. I believe I leave in they're pointing to my bed. I sleep right there. I meditate right here. This is my studio. It's all in one. I've got my music over there. I lean towards the idea that I'll go out in my sleep, and that I will enter a state of perpetual bliss. Bliss. And as a Buddha, it's permanent bliss. Unless I choose, I get to choose. The first samsara, the wheel of suffering. Once you become a Buddha, you are free from a rebirth. But many people, Buddhists prefer to, or choose to come back again and continue their gift of helping sentient beings, helping everyone obtain that ordinary birthright, our Buddha, God, divine given right. So maybe that's the state of bliss, but I know that for me personally, I want to sustain this body for as long. It's a useful tool. It allows me to communicate. It's my work that I'm doing is by my body allows a vehicle for me to share, to illustrate the condition, our birthright, to walk in this world as a living, as the Dharma. And this is the only way that the Dharma can be transmitted, is non-verbally through a living being. And that transmission is very subtle. Either some people that you're working with very closely, that's why most Buddhists have a small group that know the intentions and you can work with individually, and you can give each individual the kind of customized, personalized, specialized effort that they need to see the Dharma, to receive the blessings of your willingness to share. But for the rest of the world, no one has a clue. Not many care. I just read 0.001% are even willing to start considering the sacrifice, the surrender, the forgiveness, the acceptance, the recognition, the death of the ego, 1/1000th of 1% are even willing to entertain that. And then you move the decimal point 1 over to the left, you add a 0. 1/1000th is 0.000, and I take it to 0.0000, 4 zeros to 1/10,000th of 1% are awakened today. So that means that for, I don't want to do the math, you have 7,800 fully awakened beings that on the earth at this time, based on 1/10,000th of 1% of 7,800,000. So if you wanted to, then that means that you move the 0 over, there's $70,800 beings that have decided that it's important enough that they put the effort, the time, and into this project. So that's kind of 10 to 1, right? So it seems that 10 might be an optimal number to strive for, to be, if you have some, if the fractal, if the world is pushing you towards sharing that we can, the most important Dharma teaching is that we exist in a state of joy. And it's ours for the taking. It's ours for the acceptance. And it's no more or no less for each and every one of us. The great equalizer is joy. Existing in a state of joy. Breathing in joy. Breathing out joy. Embracing the world with joy. So those of you, the 70,800 that are interested, look around, because there's 7,800 potential teachers. And your fractal, your trajectory, your life trajectory will lead you to the one you're meant to be with.